Making a purchase order for a service. This video has been revised with changed information. Before watching this video, please watch the Creating a Basic Purchase Order video so this one makes sense. I will only talk about what's different between making a purchase order for goods and one for a service, based on what we know as of mid-March 2019. Making a purchase order for a service is similar to making a purchase order for goods. There are just a few small but critical differences that this video will cover. Note that this video may not apply to a service purchased through a contract, such as for recurring janitorial services. See the video about linking a contract or LPA to your purchase. The first difference between a goods and service purchase, and one of the biggest, is that a CAL FIRE 93 form will be required. They have not gone away. Although Fiscal replaces the Standard 65, which is a statewide form, the CAL FIRE 93 is a CAL FIRE specific form. Fiscal does not replace any of our department-specific policies. You must begin your CAL FIRE 93 when you begin planning your purchase. Sign it and have an approver sign it. Then scan it for attaching to your purchase order with as much information on it as you can get. When you reach the receiving or reconciliation process, you will scan and upload the final and complete form with all the signatures. Then save the original paper copy of the 93 in your vendor file. A new version of the CAL FIRE 93 form has been produced. Download it from the CAL FIRE intranet. Go to Library, Issuance Forms, the CAL FIRE tab, and scroll down until you find it. Here, Service Order. It comes in Word or Excel format. You must use this new and updated version of the form. Here is a blank one in Word format. You can see the top is fairly similar. Here, number 4, Vendor ID has been replaced with Supplier ID. You must enter the Fiscal Supplier ID here. Scrolling down, you'll see this is similar. You put the amounts in. Don't forget to indicate your state purpose at number 16. And then here you'll see enough space for 2 lines of Fiscal coding. If you're split coding to more than 2 lines, attach a split code table. You'll still have the contractor sign it, the receiving officer, which can be you, the buyer, and the purchase authorized by signature, which is probably your supervisor, a BC, DC, whoever usually supervises you and approves your purchases. At the top, you'll notice there is still a place for a document number with a UI in the middle. For example, 1 UI 8V123 might be a CZU document number. You still need a document number to go with your 93. If you're at CZU, you can ask Unit Finance for a UI number. Additionally, you must also attach a current CAL FIRE 20 form to your purchase order. These forms must be renewed annually, and that hasn't changed. For every single purchase order, however, you must attach the 20 for your supplier. You can just get one at the beginning of the year, the first time you buy from that supplier. Scan it once and use that same scanned PDF for every purchase you make from that supplier for that calendar year. You don't need to get a new one from the supplier for every single purchase. The other differences between a goods purchase and a service have to do with how you fill out your purchase order in Fiscal. I'll show you an example. Here is a pre-Fiscal CAL FIRE 93 for repair of a bulldozer, with its associated invoice, which is several pages long. And eventually, here is the paid receipt, and there's an automotive repair estimate sheet at the end. You can see this is on the old version of the 93 that only has the legacy coding. You wouldn't use an old 93 for a purchase anymore. In Fiscal, you'll start the purchase order the same way you would any purchase order. You'll go to Add Update POs, the Add a New Value tab, Don't touch these and click Add. Then you'll start filling in your header information. I've put in the supplier, and now the acquisition type is non-IT services. When you use non-IT services, you must fill in an acquisition subtype. Click on the magnifying glass and you'll see a list of options here. Many people have noted that these subtypes are not very applicable to CAL FIRE. There is some talk to getting new ones, but until that time, if you don't see a type here that looks more appropriate to your purchase, just choose Personal Services, which is there it is. Your acquisition method will be the same as whatever you would ordinarily use for this purchase. In this case, I'll choose Fair and Reasonable Competitive. DGS billing code is the same as before, particular for your unit. In the purchase order reference field, please put the document number that is on your 93. So for example, this one might be these are the legacy document numbers that we've always used. Here under your Add Attachments and Comments link, you will still put your justification. Make sure to click the box for approval justification. You won't need to add another page for the general provisions verbiage because that's only for non-IT goods purchases. You will, however, have to click the plus to upload your CAL FIRE 20. Make sure to put a note about what it is you're attaching and then use the Attach button, choose File, locate your 20, click Open, and then Upload. You'll also need a page for your 93. You will also upload and attach anything else you have, like an estimate or bid sheets or prior approval forms. All these supporting documents can be uploaded as a single PDF. So upload everything you need and click OK. I'm leaving this incomplete, you notice. You might wonder about this Add Reportable Attachment link. If you click on it, you'll see that it is only for certain sets of forms. You have to click the magnifying glass first to get a list and choose from the list the form that you're uploading. We occasionally use some of these forms, but not very often. So if you see a form that you do have and do need to upload, you pick it from this list and then upload it. But in this case, I'm not uploading any of those forms. Just put your 20 and your 93 in the regular Comments and Attachments link. The rest of your purchase order will be the same as any other goods purchase. You'll go into header details, change the billing address, go into PO defaults, use that for your coding if you so wish. Car reportable, again, you'll say yes and no, just as you ordinarily would, unless you have subcontracting to deal with. So the only thing left in your purchase order is the itemization section, the line section. And here is where it gets a little complicated. On 93s, we write a detailed description of the work to be performed, as seen here. And this was sufficient in the past. However, we are now being asked to create 2 line items on our purchase order for each service. One is for the service or labor portion of the purchase, such as hours of labor, installation, particular repairs, etc. The other line must be for any parts, tools, any goods, any actual physical items that were purchased to be used as a part of the service, with the associated tax for those items called out. For example, if a windshield broke on a vehicle and the supplier is charging you for the replacement windshield and the installation of it, those must be 2 separate line items. If a vendor is repairing the apparatus bay overhead door and charges you for some parts that broke in order to repair the door, as well as the time spent repairing the door, those parts and the repair labor must be itemized separately. You can group all the parts into one line and all the labor into one line, but they must exist as two separate lines, and the line with the parts must have the correct amount of tax applied. You can probably already predict the problems with this. If we're supposed to make a purchase order and get it approved before the purchase, which is the best practice, before we even have an invoice, how are we going to get those numbers correct? You don't necessarily know what parts the vendor is going to need to buy in order to fix the apparatus door. You may not know what's wrong with the bulldozer and every little nut and bolt and little piece and part that the vendor is going to need to buy. You don't know how long it's going to take the vendor to make these repairs if it's charged based upon an hourly fee for labor. Well, we can't. We don't know what those amounts are ahead of time. But we do still need approval for the service you're buying. So go ahead and prepare for your purchase without a purchase order just yet. Get any bids you need, keeping in mind that if this is going to be a reoccurring service, you need a contract and you can't purchase it through this process. Make a CAL FIRE 93, filled out as much as possible, and get an approval signature. Remember that if your service will be over $5,000, you need prior approval from BSO with a CAL FIRE 13 form. Then, once all that is in order, get the service done. As soon as it's done, get an invoice and make that purchase order immediately using the exact amounts from the invoice. Take your CAL FIRE 93, which is now completed and signed by the vendor with all the Fiscal coding filled out, and any other documents you made as supporting documentation, and attach it to the purchase order. You'll also attach those documents when you get to the receiving or reconciliation stage. So let's go back to Fiscal and tackle these line items. For any service, not just this example, you will write 2 lines of itemization unless there are no parts and no goods at all involved in this service. If they didn't need to buy anything, if they just came and unplugged the drain, they only did labor, you won't need a second line. But if there are any kind of parts, anything that was purchased, then you'll need this second line for goods. So for the labor, give yourself a description. Carrying on with my example with this old 93 where a bulldozer was being repaired, I'll put a description such as repair bulldozer, labor. For purchase order quantity, you can put put 1. For unit of measurement, put LO for lot. Now in this case, this had a multi-page invoice, and each page had a section that indicated how much labor. So I'll have to go through to each page and add up this amount for labor. And then when I have a total, enter it here under the price. You'll also need a code for the category. You may wish to use this DGS UNSPSC search page in order to find a category code. It's a little bit easier than using Fiscal. There are some good options under vehicle maintenance and repair services to try to pick something that is most suitable for your particular service. If you can't find exactly what you need, you can use a higher level code. If I just take the code for vehicle maintenance and repair services, I can put it in this category, add a couple zeros to fill out the 8 numbers needed. And then once I've added up the price of however much labor I have, enter it here. I'm just making up a number this time. Go into the schedule icon, go to the schedule and sales use tax icon, and make sure that you set your labor as item is exempt, because there's no tax on labor. Click calculate SUT and or refresh to make sure that Fiscal gets the message, and click OK. You can check your coding. Whatever you put in the PO defaults box, if you clicked override, it should appear there. Return to main page. Now that you've done one line, you can click save. I recommend once you've got your first line done that you click save just in case you get called away. So if Fiscal times out, at least this much work will be saved because the purchase order is not saved yet. You'll need a second line for your parts and parts if you have any. In my case, I'll say I do. So I click OK, get my second line. Here, you'll put in a description. You can use a description like this, similar to the first line where you specified it was labor by specifying parts. Remember that only the first 30 digits here, only the first 30 letters will appear at later stages on the voucher, on the receipt, etc. So don't let your description get really long with the critical letters and words appearing at the end of it. Make sure that words like labor and parts appear close enough to the beginning that they're going to stay as this purchase order moves through the process. Again, you can put 1. Even though there may be many parts, you're reporting it as a lot. Put LO for lot. Then you put your category code in here. Ordinarily, I would think you can just copy whatever code you used for your service, unless you want to find a particular code for whatever parts it is that you're buying. If it's not a vehicle service, of course, don't copy me here. This is just a vehicle service. And then you'll have to go through your purchase order, go through your invoice and add up all the parts that were purchased. I'll make up another number. I'll say there were $500.01 of parts. Now you'll have to go into your schedule icon again, go into your tax icon, and this time sales tax is going to be applicable if sales tax was applied on the invoice. And you'll need the amount you calculated here to match what appears on your invoice. Once you've adjusted the tax code as needed to be your location to get the correct amount of tax, click OK. Again, in your chart fields icon, it will be whatever you put in your PO defaults, provided you clicked override, or you can go in and enter it manually here. If you have any shipping, if the vendor is charging you for the shipping to get any of these parts delivered, you can put them under miscellaneous charges. Click that little green icon. You'll have to click the plus button to get a row. Then click the magnifying glass under charge type and select the type of freight that you have been charged for. Click on it, whichever one is most suitable. You can enter a flat amount for whatever they charged you and click OK. If for whatever reason you cannot get the tax to be accurate to what's on the invoice, it could be because the vendor charged you the wrong amount of tax. In that case, you'll have to go back to the vendor, explain the situation, ask them to generate a new invoice with the correct amount of tax. If they did give you the correct amount, but you can't get Fiscal to comply, which occasionally does happen, create another line item for the tax. This is a last resort, however. You'll only do this if you can't get Fiscal to give you the right amount. Label this third line sales tax, put in the amount, and set it as tax exempt. You'll also have to set your parts, your second line, as tax exempt. The purchase order will be processed much quicker and have less chance of being rejected if you put the sales tax in the correct place under the sales tax icon. But if for some reason you can't, make a third line. When you're done with your line items, you'll want to click Calculate. This will make Fiscal think. It will include the tax and any shipping together under Freight, Tax, Miscellaneous. Make sure that the total amount that Fiscal calculates matches what's on your invoice. These do need to be the same. Once you've entered your line items, you've manipulated the tax as necessary, any shipping charges, then you can click Save again, go to the top, and click this green checkbox to send the purchase order for approval. That's all for the differences when you're making a service purchase order instead of a goods purchase order. Dispatching is the same, and the receiving or reconciling process will be covered in a different video, but it too is very similar to receiving or reconciling for a goods purchase.